In my second year of college, I took my second sociology class, Cultural and Racial Minorities. And in this class, for the very first time in my life, I was in a group of people where for the first time as a white person, I was not in a position of majority. Half the class was black, half the class was white. I never did know for sure if this was by design or if it had just sort of happened that way, but however the class came about, my worldview expanded to see things in new ways, leaving my mind flooded with questions. It quickly was becoming clear to me my education was greatly lacking in some very important areas. So wanting to know more, wanting to get some answers, the next semester I signed up for a Black history course. It wasn't that I had not learned about the Civil War, slavery and plantations, Harriet Tubman and George Washington Carver, Reconstruction and the carpetbaggers, but no one ever in any class had ever taught me so much about the history of my own country and taught me the real truth about this history, sometimes in gruesome detail, and taught it in a way that made such an impact on me as this class. This experience raised so many questions for me and set me on a wonderfully challenging, transformative, sometimes difficult journey worth more to me than you could possibly imagine. Now, those classes were a long time ago, and some people tell me there's no longer a need for special efforts to celebrate or learn Black history or to celebrate Black History Month, and I agree. If all of us honestly did know the real history of our country, not the sanitized version, but the more profound truth of who we are and how we got to be this way, maybe there wouldn't be a need for a particular emphasis on Black history, or for that matter, on the history of all the cultures and races in our midst. Then some from all-white churches have told me there's no reason for them to celebrate Black History Month, or in some cases even Martin Luther King Sunday, because there are no Black people in their congregation. But in a country like ours, the history of any of our people cannot be separated from the history of all of our people. The history of this country is the history of all of us, and the history of one group is our history no matter who we are. We need to know our history, what our past truly is, and how this past continues to shape our present lives. Cynthia Patterson says, "Those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. You have to expose who you are so that you can determine what you need to become." We need to know our history in order to make intentional decisions about how we are going to live in this world. And if we are going to be Christian, if we are going to follow the Jesus way, we also need to know what Jesus is all about. Not the sanitized Jesus, but the real thing. In the last few weeks, we've been following Jesus as his ministry begins. We met him at the River Jordan as he was baptized. We followed him into the desert for a lonely time of temptation and trial, a wilderness journey where he is tested and tried, strengthened and prepared for what would lie ahead. Now in the synagogue, beginning to teach, we hear Jesus reading from the scroll of Isaiah, moving into God's call for his life, ready to redefine religion and what it means to follow God. The Spirit of our God is upon me because the Holy One has anointed me to bring good news to those who are poor. God has sent me to proclaim liberty to those held captive, recovery of sight to those who are blind, and release to those in prison, to proclaim the year of our God's favor. Biblical scholar Miguel de la Torre says, these first words of Jesus in Luke's gospel resonate with the poor for whom the good news is given. These words resonate with the broken, the captives, the wounded. These words resonate with all who hope for the year of Jubilee, that time when wealth is redistributed in order to create economic justice. As Howard Thurman observed, the masses of the people live with their backs constantly against the wall. They are the poor, the disinherited, the dispossessed. Then Thurman asks, what does our religion say to them? And then goes on to say, the search for the answer to this question is perhaps the most important religious quest of modern time. These first words of Jesus in Luke's Gospel also should resonate with the rest of us. As De La Torre reflects, these words are also for all those who refuse to see and who need their consciousness raised. Now, of course, over the years, many things have changed for the better between some groups of people, but there is still a long ways to go in breaking down barriers and assuring justice for all people. A long way to go in following the Jesus way, a long way to go on the path to intentional Christian community. If we are going to be truly Christian in our world, we need to know our history, the unsanitized version, and we need to know Jesus, the unsanitized Jesus, the real deal. In his baptism, Jesus became clear about who he is as he prepares to begin his ministry. Jesus lives through a long wilderness experience where his identity is tested and tried, where he meets these challenges with courage and integrity, getting ready for the work God will give him. Jesus has been looking around, seeing how things really are in the world, knowing the history and culture of his people, recognizing all of the good and all of the evil. Now, at the very beginning of his ministry, Jesus takes a stand, clearly stating why he is here, what he is all about, how he is going to spend his life, and what he is willing to die for. We also need to look around, to honestly and clearly see how things really are in the world, understanding and accepting our background, our past, our whole history, our true history, with all of its good and all of its evil. And then we have to decide how we are going to spend our lives. So why does Black history matter? Because it's a history of everyone in this country. Because it exposes us as the people and the nation we really are. Because it helps us to know what we need to do, what we need to become. Repeating Patterson's words, those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. You have to expose who you are so that you can determine what you need to become. In the waters of baptism, who we truly are is affirmed. Each and every one of us equally a child of God, given enough courage and integrity, honestly to explore and to own how we are living our lives in the midst of the injustices embedded into our culture. This journey of facing the reality of our lives, corporately and individually, may lead us into a season of wandering, into a profound wilderness experience, into a time of preparation, so that we can become the people and the community God can really use. And in the bread and the wine of communion, we commit ourselves to going the distance with Jesus, possibly realizing along the way that God is rejecting all the things we think are Christian, calling us instead to use our energy to bring the waters of justice rolling down everywhere for everyone. This day, you are invited to the table of the living Christ, to allow the Spirit of God to enter into your soul, exposing who you are, so that you can determine what you need to become. You are invited to the table of the living Christ to be healed from the damage we do to ourselves when we oppress others in our confusion about our own identity as child of God. You are invited to the table of the living Christ to give your life, to risk your life, to free others from injustice, injustice that destroys lives and diminishes another beloved child of God. You are invited to this table to become more Christian. Thanks be to God. Amen.